Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us once again here at the Bard Inn. My name is Phil Rice, and once again, I have a wonderful lineup of nice people. We're going to chat all about magic, esoterics, Franz Baden. We've got some new topics to discuss here as well. And so, yeah, I'm just going to bring everyone in. And so let's go for it. So first of all, I'd like to welcome once again Mr. Philip Harris-Smith. How are you, sir?
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Awesome. And how's things in your world, sir?
Well, we've had thunderstorms all day, which is unusual in the Rhondda in South Wales here in the UK. And I've been working out some Enochian stuff because the symbols might have been a bit jumbled up on something I was doing. And then when I sorted that out, the thunder disappeared, which is probably just a coincidence, but that's how the day's gone down anyway.
Beautiful. Wonderful. All right. Let's bring in hello, Victoria. How are you, sister?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Thank you so much for joining us. What's been happening?
I'm glad it's the weekend. It's been a busy week with work, with trading. I do day trading on the side. It's been getting cold here. It was getting warm for a while. Then it started getting cold again. Yes, otherwise all good, and resurrecting from a crazy week.
Fantastic. Yeah, nice. Yeah, I saw you've got a new video out too, and I think was the knowledge of the sun, knowledge?
The Sun of Knowledge. So that's a 13th century Arabic grimoire by Bani. And he was a Muslim, but he wrote a series of books about Islamic magic. And right now, only one book has been translated to English. I think there are 7 or 8. But it covers things like talismans, letter magic, like Franz Baden, astrology, sigils, how to command jinn. It even has a lot of Arabic references, like the Ring of Solomon, how Jesus raised the dead, the letters that were on Moses' staff, and things like that. So it's a kind of outside of the Barden canon, but I was really delighted to see it because it's a very devout book. It uses the 99 names of God, references to the Quran. So it's integrating kind of love and devotion to Allah in magical operations.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, yeah, well, definitely, please, audience, go and check out Victoria's YouTube channel there, Psyche Alchemica, and I'll put a link down in the description. All right, let's bring in Tanya and James from Perseus and Falcon Books Publishing. Hello, James and Tanya. How are you?
Hi, very, very well, thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Well, it's lovely to have you here, and I know you two are super busy people, just like pretty much everyone. What's been happening in the various camps that you can share?
Well, Falcon Books, as I say, we've been quite prolific this year so far. We have a number of books from Virgil, a number focusing on prayer, and also we're currently working on a prayer anthology, which is been produced by the Barden community. I think Victoria also is an author to this as well. Beautiful book. Been working on some designs, some interior designs, and also we're pretty much there, close now to publishing and putting it together. So I'm really excited about that. And this year we have a number of exciting titles. Also Stellar Magic from Andre will be working on next, and also Shaman for Angels from Nenad. Really meaty titles coming up as well. So yeah, lots going on.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Much to check out there. And once again, everyone, check out the description below. Links to Falcon Books Publishing. And James, how are you, sir? And what's happening? What's been happening with Perseus since we last caught up?
I am well. Yeah, it's been a week of speaking with lots of interviewees. So yeah, I'm really looking to get much more wide and wonderful interviews on Perseus. So that's been great. There's been some just amazing people to chat with who are happy to share their life's work via an interview. So much coming. Some other big things coming, which I have to keep secret, which I'm trying my best not to talk about. And alongside that, obviously the tech things, I'm quite geeky, so I'm really loving all the new features for Perseus that are being done and that I'm sort of testing out. So yeah, exciting week, and more next week as well.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, let's bring in Mr. Bob Smith from 60 Skills. How are you, Bob?
Very fine, very fine. How's everybody out there doing today?
Mate, I'm a box of fluffy ducks. Thank you for asking. What's been happening this week for 60 Skills?
Working on the infamous Zodiac course, so that's all good. Getting ready for my podcast with Mark Stavish tomorrow, where we're going to talk all about egregores and what that means. Doing a little more work on how to turn a ritual powered system into an internal powered one along the lines of some of the Golden Dawn work. So if I can ever make any sense of that, we'll have something out there for some of the ritual magicians. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation tomorrow with yourself and Mr. Stavish. I'm sure that it'll be many others will also find it intriguing. So yes, and thank you so much, sir. It's lovely to have everyone here. Thank you so much for joining once again, and thank you to everyone in the audience who's here right now. Please, if you have a question, I've got a little banner here. Throw it into the live chat, guys, and as we receive them, we'll take them, we'll pass them around to the panel in chunks for those who wish to comment. And yeah, so let's get started. So now I wanted to sort of start this conversation and this particular session off with just some general lifestyle topics here. And so, one popular issue that I come across in forums and on the discords, etc., is obviously maintaining regular practice is crucial to outcomes, essentially. Like you build critical mass over time, but if you have too many breaks, you can have sporadic as opposed to sort of like robust, repeatable kinds of outcomes. And so I wanted to just pose this out to the panel here and say, what is some best advice? In fact, I've even got the question here. Dun, dun, dun. All right, now I'm going to do something a bit different here. I'm not going to point out. Would anyone like to approach this question first in the panel? No, good. Okay, Bob, would you like to comment, please, sir?
Sure. As some people are aware of, I don't believe in willpower for getting things done. I believe in routine. And honestly, the easiest and best way to keep momentum up is whatever your available window for practice is. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, hour and a half, 4 hours, whatever that is that works for you. You have that window of practice, and nothing short of the Kaiser's army showing up makes you miss that. So if your window is 4:30 to 6 a.m. in the morning, because that's the only time you have available before you got to wake up to take the kids off to school and get ready for work, then that's what it is. And when it's 4:30, you get up and you go in and you make the donuts, as we like to say here in the US. Whether you feel good, whether you feel bad, whether you're into it that day, whether you're not. And if you look at people who are very fit or who run successful businesses or are otherwise high-level performers, for the most part, that's the way they work. All right, it's 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, time to go to the gym, because that's when I go. And that's the best advice I can give anybody is, if you rely upon willpower or feeling good to power your practice, you will generally fail. If you rely upon routine You're going to have better days and you're going to have worse days, but at least you're having that day.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. And I mean, that's it, you know, like, I think too that you get used to it too. You know, you keep up you keep up, you know, you push yourself. That willpower can be a generative, like, to get things moving, initial momentum, I think, can't it? But essentially nothing replaces, like, if you get used to something, like it's you know, the dishes need to be done, you just do the dishes. It's not a big deal. You just do the thing, you know, like, and you get the benefits. So thank you, sir. Right. Victoria.
Yeah, another thing to consider is when you first look at IIH, initiation into Hermetics as a whole, it can be intimidating. Say, even if you're at the first step and you think, I need to get from here all the way to there. So I kind of like the divide and conquer approach, but rather than like two fashions of an army, it's dividing your long-term goal and your short-term goal. So if you make your short-term goal being, I am going to fixate on, say, completing step 1. That is what you become consumed by, you put your energy and attention towards, and what you are working on. And then that becomes a marker to, like, project manage continuing in your development. So then you know, okay, this first marker of my long-term goal is done. Okay, I did step 1, let me go to step 2. And then you put everything into there. Because sometimes it's, and I've mentioned this before, it's easy to kind of get tripped up when people think about how far they need to go, or like what it's all going to take, what's involved, and just like show up and do the practice. And as Bob said, just keep showing up to it. One thing I like is just doing the practice for itself and not for the expected outcomes. You know, so it's like, you brush your teeth because you know you need to brush your teeth. You know, you take a shower because otherwise, yeah, you would end up stinking after several days, but you just know that's what that compounds into just health and cleanliness overall.
Wonderful response. Yeah, you know, it's a very pleasant experience for myself to sit down and do these practices, and then the resulting after effect. It's very wonderful. And so, you know, these are things to hold on to too, guys. Is remember when you sit down and do the practice and you go, wow, this is really great. You know, something to look forward to. So, Tanya, would you like to comment on this, please?
Yeah, I kind of reiterate really what Bob and Victoria said. Absolutely, number one, routine, and also like Victoria said, bringing segmenting things off into focusing on what your goals are at that time, and then to move on. I think as well as you go on, I found it's become, you have sort of fitting it all in that throughout the day can be quite a challenge as well. So my experience is sort of, you know, whenever I'm doing daily mundane chores, I try and fit that in as well, or use it, incorporate it in my daily life. So it's not something which is outside of my daily, it becomes part of my practices, my daily life. So for example, if I'm walking in the park, then, you know, practice the elements, or if I'm washing up, practice mindfulness, or, you know, if I'm swimming, you know, I'm can use magical washing or something like that. Probably not so good in the swimming pool, but, you know, it was that kind of idea, you know, sort of using different mundane tasks to sort of fit it all in. And as well, I think with practice, it becomes so joyful, and it's not something, it's something you want to do and look forward to. And I think if you don't do it, you really miss it. I think, and as time goes on, I think it, like I say, it sort of becomes ingrained in one's practice. So yeah, that's what I have to offer, really.
Pretty wonderful. Yeah, and absolutely, I think, you know, when it turns into something that you look forward to, You know, I found that sometimes that takes a bit of effort to get into that regular thing, but it's like if I don't do it, I really notice it. And yeah, I prefer when I have the momentum personally, because it's yeah, it's just very enjoyable, like you said. Okay, now Mr. Philip Harris Smith. Now we were talking just off camera prior to the live, and you actually brought up something related that, and you know, you're welcome to bring it up if you will, but you know, regardless, I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Well, I was thinking about what folks were saying here, and one of the things that struck me, just very quickly, use a couple examples from outside of the Barden praxis. In my 20s, I did some Aikido, and one day we had this exercise where we were lifting and carrying the instructor, and he could make himself. There's all four of us holding him, and he could make himself so heavy, and he wasn't a very heavy chap. So he could literally, we couldn't keep him off his feet off the ground. He could just do it at will. And he'd start off by saying heavier or not, heavier or not. So that you could say that was auto-suggestion. But then he would just do a gesture at the other students watching. And we wouldn't know, because it would just be little fingers. And we would be unable to keep him off the ground. And for one of the other guys that was there, basically that was it. From then on, for the rest of his life, he was a martial artist of one kind or another. And you know, obviously another example would be my initial work with the Golden Dawn, which I've mentioned on a previous live stream, where I was working with these kind of for doorways. And the first time I did it, I had a blindfold on, and I was sitting in an asana, and I'd opened this elemental doorway to earth, which it's called Prathivi, I think, if I remember correct. And it was like, even though I was a blindfold on my eyes were open behind the blindfold, and it was like I could have put my arm through this gateway, literally. I could have literally, you know, actually put my arm into another world, as it were. There's like some kind of you know, one of these novels, these sort of, it was almost like that. And that was such a remarkable experience for me that basically from then on I was a magician. You know, that was it. That was and before then I was doing, you know, I knew I had to be regular and steady and keep going. And I think that what happens, I think, for people is they have and it could be in any discipline, you know, not necessarily magic, could be martial arts or meditation, all sorts of you get a breakthrough event because you've been assiduous, because you've been working steadily. You get, and it might be just a little thing to other people, but it's a big thing to you. So, for example, the Aikido thing, I thought that was impressive, but it didn't make me feel, oh, I'm going to do martial arts the rest of my life. I actually stopped doing martial arts after a few years. I was more interested in doing magic. But there is the steady work and sticking to it. Will eventually produce, as far as I can tell, it will produce for people a kind of a breakthrough event. And what it seems to do is it seems to change your priorities permanently. And then you then you don't sort of like, it's like you don't think, oh, I've got to do this today, or it's like, oh no, I didn't do it. It goes the other way around. Do you see what I mean? It's sort of, oh, instead of, oh, I suppose I have to do this because it's rigorous, you know, and you do get days like that. It is joyful, like you say, some days, other days it's not. But if you don't do it, you're like really annoyed with yourself because that's your thing, you know, that's what you do. It's somehow your priorities, your hierarchy has changed because you were so solid and hardworking to start off with. You had some kind of breakthrough event in whatever the discipline is, and that breakthrough event might be quite rudimentary when you look back at it, but it shaped you in such a way that was kind of a path that you then went down along, which is different to what I was talking about earlier. Shall I very briefly mention the other thing before we came on stream? Well, the other thing is that once you've started to work, you can actually overdo it. So it's not like, oh no, I've got to do it today, otherwise I'm lacking. Sometimes you have to stop because, well, I think several of us, we were talking about that, and we've experienced that, where you do so much, you have to basically stop and let yourself cool off for a bit, for the longest time for me ever that was about a fortnight, and by the end of it I was fidgeting because I wasn't doing any work, but I knew I had to not do it because I needed to kind of cool off and let myself sort of like slow down a bit, you know. And there's that kind, that's at the other end of it, you know. So the regular practice I would say is like the starting motor, and once you get this kind of thing going, you actually have to be careful to let the momentum fade sometimes before, otherwise you can end up overdoing it as well. And that was what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much what I was thinking of.
Yeah, wonderful. You know, personally, I found that having a parallel discipline in my life that's maybe unrelated, but not completely unrelated, essentially feeds into that, you know, ability to maintain momentum in other disciplines as well. You know, like things are translatable. You know, I get up and go for a run, and I do my practice. You know, I push myself to do these things. But yeah, you're right. Absolutely. You know, you can overcharge too, and so being conscious of, you know, like things. Oh, there he is.
So
anyway,
Saul was shaking her head against the thing. Sorry.
Maybe she disagrees with me. Oh, come on, man.
She's just being naughty because I wasn't stroking her.
Bless her. Okay, James, would you like to comment?
Yeah, sure. Of course, I agree with a lot of the things that have been said. I think it ebbs and flows as well in your life. You know, when I was young, when I had time, I'd burn all the hours on meditation and kung fu. That's all I did. You know, so it depends on the stage of your life, your responsibilities, of course. And, you know, I mean, I know I was so consistent, you know, amazingly consistent. And then I got a dog. And everything was thrown out the way because it's really what she wants in the morning comes first, or how desperate she is to get out. So my training then moves around that. So one of the biggest things I found when I had a period of having to travel from one coast of the island to the other coast of the island for work is pretty much my morning or evening practice would be kind of like my test bed, where I would test my levels to ensure that I was meeting standards and this kind of thing. It would be my level test, and my day would be where I would play and put in the repetitions of that skill. So if I was working projection of consciousness, transference of consciousness, you know, I would play with everything possible in my line of sight during the day. I'd be on the bus. I'd be going into an apple on the bus. I'd be projecting elsewhere on the bus. You know, I'd be doing energies into my elements, into my hand. I'd be charging elements into my fingers. I'd be doing finger gestures, these kind of things. If I was already working on a gesture, I'd be charging that gesture up even more. So my day and my travel was actually really good because I did so much repetition. And this is kind of almost like what Bob and Mark Rasmus talk about, is I was sort of doing miniature practice. You know, you're doing something for a minute, or you're doing something for 2 minutes, and I'd be doing it again and again and again during my commute, which in total was 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours for the whole day. So that's a lot of practice. And then my home practice, if I was still awake enough, would be a quite rigorous level test, but quite short. Yeah, it would be 20 minutes, something like that. I would just make sure that I'm meeting the thresholds, the lowest thresholds of that level, to ensure I'm not regressing and to ensure I am incrementally going forward. So as long as I'm going forward, that was the most important thing, because obviously when you first start out, you think, I'm on 1, I want to get to 10. But then as you work the system more and more, and you get more experience, you think, well, actually, yeah, I'm here, but did I go into the depth there? So you kind of end up doing circuits and circles and going back and going forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And so your obsession with moving forward kind of, or at least for me anyway, reduces, and your obsession with depth and mastership of those skills kind of becomes more important. So once you've gone on a couple of steps, you can go back and look at those earlier steps and go, oh, okay, how am I now? Because those other steps have also built towards that step. So in terms of momentum in practice, it's absolutely important, but I think it's very important to, because for me anyway, it's almost like an obsession. What are you doing at that time? So if I'm working on a particular step, I'll be at the coffee shop and I'll be like thinking about that, and I'll be like, well, can I put my mind in that? What happens if I put my mind in that? And I'll be going over my current work and thinking about it. So I think the day there is for play and for percolation upon those things. Of course, unless you've got a responsible job, of course, and you need to split yourself. But if I'll use that for play, I'll use that for repetitions, exposure to that thing, exposure to that skill. And morning and evening, I'll simply test beds to test my level, my thresholds of highest and lowest ability, which will vary as you go on. And that's about it.
Wonderful, thank you. And that leads beautifully into the next topic for discussion, and that is essentially, what have I put here? Okay, integrating the practices into everyday life means that we can add new value to familiar activities, saving time and immersing ourselves deeper into practice. And so what happens is that rather than the practice being a separate sort of portioned off part of the day, it starts to, permeate more into our everyday living. And, Mr. Barden talks about this, like when you're doing one thing, focus on that one thing, and then it becomes essentially like a concentration exercise. So you could have the radio on, you could have, you'd be doing the dishes, you could be doing, there could be having a conversation, but you're having your awareness spread. And so, in some ways, it's a missed opportunity. It's like when you're eating food and you're watching or listening or reading something, you're not really drilling out the potential or honing on the potential of it. So the next question that I have here is, now I've put this I probably framed this a bit wrong, but I'm just going to say it. How were you able to infuse practice into your existing life with existing activities? So, just everyday things. And so I'll pass this one to, let's see, let's start with Tanya. Tanya, you did briefly touch upon this. Would you like to expand on this in any way?
Yeah, I think it's something that is one that naturally occurs after time, and also I think when people start working sometimes with spiritual practices, they kind of separate them a little bit. Oh, I'm doing my spiritual thing now, and then I go to work, and then you can forget about it and then have an argument with your neighbor or your work colleague or something like that. And I think being aware, I think number one, Barden's work allows you to become very present, I think. And for me, I think I mentioned this also in a previous video as well, but the working on being present and being aware and conscious of what you're doing, I think from the void meditation is really important and helps you. And then you're in the moment and you're able to interact and fully and be present. And I think that really, for me, like I'm thinking back when I was teaching, that was really important. And I was able to sort of observe what I was doing and observe the children and sort of separate myself and see the whole situation rather than being immersed into it. So most definitely, I think that it overflows, and also vice versa. If you have a very demanding job, that can also help you develop skills which you can use in your Barden practice. For example, with publishing, I have to concentrate a lot for long hours, and I work in silence. And so with that, it sort of helped me build up my concentration ability as well. So when I meditate, then it's a lot easier for me to enter into the void in some ways, because I've been in that environment in most of my day. So it's I'm working because of that silence. So I think kind of, as I touched on it previously with everyday life, and like James mentioned as well. So yeah, for me, I think it has naturally become integrated as I do things. For example, like, walking the dog, maybe doing breathing practice. If you're out doing something that you can also be in a way of presence, being able to influence things or use your abilities to influence your day in a positive light, or even if to support somebody as well. I think that is also important. So yeah, that's my experience.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, and I've found that as I've sought to bring in the practices and infuse them into existing activities, the practices become a lived action, and that it's funny because then the activity is like, oh, that thing that I do every day is how I practice that particular exercise, for example. And yes, wonderful response. Thank you. Okay, Bob, Sue, would you like to jump in on this?
Really just paralleling the thoughts of Tanya and Victoria. For me, common way I use practices when I go for a walk, electric and magnetic lines of force. Maybe I'm doing ball above head. It's rare that I don't incorporate that into something like that. It's if I'm sitting in a meeting in negotiations with others, it's not uncommon. I'll do thought transference with the other individual, so I have a better understanding of what it is they're trying to accomplish or feel or do. So again, just like everybody's been pointing out here, the ability to practice ad hoc is only limited by your creativity. Just make sure that whatever you're doing isn't running counter to the primary activity you're trying to work on. This is pretty much it. And I think that kind of parallels what Barton was going on about, where he's like, okay, if you're going to do something, do it. We just have a little more technology at hand to aid the process, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well said. Well stated. James.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, following on from what I said before, play is my theme, and infusing it into my life. I mean, I know when I was teaching, that was a wonderful opportunity because kids, kids don't play along to be polite. So it was a good opportunity to kind of work with the vital force in terms of setting up atmospheres, and also it was a good opportunity to put that stuff into finger rituals to immediately create that, or to spend time before class creating certain atmospheres. So for me, yeah, I used it in those circumstances. I also I got this a little bit from what was it, the old William Walker Atkinson books of being a center of power, and with that, along with the Bard and finger rituals, I would build up the huge amount of vital force along with this ideation of being a center of power. Basically, you're the center point of the universe, because the universe is infinite and the point is kind of within the universe is infinitely big or infinitely small. So that dynamic idea of being the center of power, charged with as many breaths as I could fit in of the vital force connected to a mudra, would be something, I would use in an interview or a meeting, where I needed that extra oomph to be dynamic to be confident, to be everything people needed me to be. So I would do that, and I would probably hold that posture with my hand in my pocket or, you know, on my lap subtly during that meeting as well. So this was all great experimentation, because you could very much see the difference between the state of being when I do that and when I don't do that. So yeah, so it's all just testing and playing for me, how I bring it into my life.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And, you know, obviously there's things in our lives that are very familiar, and, you know, we do these things every day. And then when we bring in practice, we can see how those things that we are super familiar with change. And so we can use, I think I found anyway, personally, that it makes for a good gauge. Like you said, even James, you know, like, you know, and changing the atmosphere of a situation. You know, when you see people's body postures and language and that just suddenly relax, as an example, and, you know, or whatever, you know, I think these familiar things act as good reference points. So yeah, wonderful response. Now, Victoria, would you like to jump in on this?
Yeah, how are you able to infuse practice into your existing life? Well, first, I think by being a practitioner itself, you are infusing practice into your life because it becomes part of your lifestyle. It becomes part of your routine, part of your habit, as you as we covered in the prior question. But one thing I wanted to mention is, on one level, I approach my practice as it fades into the background and it becomes part of the mainframe. So whenever a situation comes up where I need my traits, my skills, my abilities gained from practice, those things become activated and can turn on. So you can, you know, do a deliberate act like charging water or food or cleansing yourself in a shower. But also you can have your skill sets and abilities just in your back pocket and they're kind of on silent, like your phone is on silent. But if there's something that happens that pings, it needs to come up, it will need to come up. So for example, like reading Akasha or transfer of consciousness. Say you're in a dynamic dealing with another person. Like in my day job, I deal with high-level stress legal stuff for multi-billion-dollar corporations. So there's dynamics there with, you know, personalities and cultures and a lot of interpersonal relationships that have to be navigated. So understanding where people are coming from, or the energy that they are using, and kind of what their own astral worlds are, you know, it allows you to have more insight and then manage yourself on how to then manage those relationships. And that I want to mention the elemental equilibrium exercise, because even just doing that, which is a practice in and of itself, it then reverberates out into your existing life. So as you practice, you know, our soul mirrors, you balance them, but as you practice and as life happens, things might kind of ping one way or another, and we sometimes get out of balance. At least that's my personal experience. But when you return to balancing your elements again, that will have a natural bleed out effect and also impact everything in your life. I noticed the first time I sincerely established elemental equilibrium, a lot of my karma got reset, and a lot of the things I had to deal with no longer became an issue once I met that threshold of elemental equilibrium. But as Bob said, you can get creative too. You know, you can do rituals around your home to charge the space with different signatures. You can make each room be a different energy. You can, if you're kind of a universalist like me, you can program different energies of different pantheons in different rooms if you want. You can, if you're sitting at a cafe and you see people having an argument, you can project like calming, understanding energy if you want. So there's really a lot of options available, and as Bob said, it's just about your creativity and seeing in any given situation, or something that you can apply, because you're already present to whatever's happening. But if you want to use any of these tools you have in your toolkit, you can.
Yeah, wonderful. And I have to say, just as a general byproduct of practice, is that my personal situational awareness in any given situation is greatly enhanced. And so there's so many wonderful boons to explore. And I'm not sure who mentioned it, but essentially exploring the depth of the exercises, rather than like you at the beginning, you might see 1 and you want to get to 10 type of thing. But I think it might have been James mentioned that, there's these new depths and there's new width that opens up for exploration, that adds new levels of interest, because we have increased capacities for perception and that too. Now, I'm just going to say that I do have a name marking system here, and I think I just want to make sure that I got everyone on this question. Philip, did you comment on this?
No, I was thinking of something that might be a little different, though. Although that doesn't mean that. I mean, I agree with the general thrust of what people have been saying about how you can use various exercises and apply them as you go through your day. But because most of my life has been with that kind of thing to do with ritual magic, there's been an emphasis on setting aside a work area, a ritual area, and having much more fantastical things occurring in that environment compared to the daily mundane, if you like, environment. And it's very necessary to have a demarcation between all the worldviews and things you see and experience in a ritual environment, and the things that you do in driving your car, or making sure you've got the right money to pay for the coffee, or like interacting with work at work and things like that. But when you the ritual work impacts usually indirectly your mundane world, the things that you do in ritual and how you progress in, and it's almost like you've got a double life. And I think that is something you can do with Barden's work, but it's perhaps not prevalent. It's more of a specific thing. You do literally go, you come home, you chill out for half an hour, you don't eat, and then you do some kind of ritual that you've been working on for a few months. It's gradually gaining momentum. You've even booked some holiday so that you'll have a few days off, so you can do it 5 times a day. In this case, that was with my wife, for example. And there's a crescendo within that, and that then impacts indirectly the world, unless you specifically want it to have an outcome in the mundane world. And that's kind of it's not in conflict with what you guys have been saying, but it is a different deal, if you see what I mean. So there's certainly doing a lot of Barden stuff in the normal run-of-the-mill existence is rather fun, actually. But as someone who's been more involved in ritual magic than perhaps some Barden practitioners, there's also this setting aside and getting very, very intensive in often a different way, and how that has to be kept separate, because your worldview in that place is not the same as the worldview in normal life. And if you had them both together, people would probably think that you were mad, or you were having some kind of a psychotic break, because your terms of reference are completely different. So there is that side of things as well. But that, like I say, that does not necessarily, it does not follow that there's an antithesis. It's just a you set aside a time and a space, and that is also an important, for me, it's certainly something where Barden's techniques are also to be found. So there's a slightly different view, slightly different approach, but not conflicting, because obviously Barden stuff does very well in just as you go through your day. That it does very well indeed. Yeah.
Well, wonderful commentary, and yeah, that's actually a really great thing to talk about. Is that, you know, obviously you could almost say that there's these kind of just loosely two approaches, which is where you're, you know, there's an alchemy of interaction with the everyday world, and then there's this time that we steal ourselves away for these, like you said, intensive processes to essentially reinforce and really deepen our well, essentially you're removing the noise, you know, like you're setting aside, you're creating a sacred space, you know, you're moving from the mundane into the sacred, and there's time to explore the world and how these practices interact with the world. But yeah, absolutely. And I just want to actually just put this out to anyone in the panel here who would like to just comment or that on what Philip has said about, you know, like the demarcation of allocated time, and as opposed to, say, just sort of playing in the world and the value and importance of that. Victoria.
Yeah, I'll add to this, because as I was thinking about this live and some of our questions, a lot of my persona in the world is very muggle, very simple, you know, forward facing. I have a very simple, basic life, you know, but then we have, and I think a lot of magicians are like this, you know, you don't have the luxury to be a public magician to the world. For various reasons, you know, whether it's the law of silence, or, you know, you have people in your life, you may not want to know that, or a career. But I feel like part of that is also learning to just carry the magic with you, even if you aren't doing a ritual or, you know, integrating Barden practices in your day-to-day. So I mentioned previously having it in the back kind of framework, the hard drive, you know, so you can operate magically on a very subtle level, because this is going a little bit left field, because also the more, depending on the kind of energy you work with, the more energy you charge and bring into a space, the easier it is to, you know, catch the attention of things. Especially, you know, in my younger training days, I used to carry around a lot of power. It's kind of power that was part of an egregore I was in, but that also caused a lot of things to kind of come into my field of influence, because things see that, they smell it, they get attracted to it, you know, so things start kind of like putting their fingers into different places. So if you can also operate from the background and the mainframe and let your magic unfold on a very subtle level, I kind of like that covert form of doing magic as well. You know, you can understand there's different planes of reality. That might be more kind of Akashic based approach to doing magic. But when you've already done your work, you have your work. You know, I was once taught, if you can do something once, you can do it again, because you already have that moment and experience that is in Akasha. So as long as you have faith, it is always accessible. So all your experiences, your abilities, you can put into your Akashic field. And whether you are pulling it out every day or once a year or every 10 years, you know, you have that with you. You know, for example, Barden was in being in the concentration camp. So, you know, you can use cabala letters and mudras and magic to affect change. But also, not saying we're in a society at this time where that's something we're facing, but as a magician, you can also do your work on a very subtle, quiet, undetected level, and that is just as efficient, and you are still abiding with your practice from that perspective too.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Would anyone else like to comment?
I don't know, Victoria, you're giving away all the secrets here.
Yeah. This is the thing is that, you know, being able to mentally transfer into previous experiences that we generate for ourselves. And, you know, I've got notable experiences in my life that I can go back to. So once it's in the field, you can tap back in. It's locked in there, and I think that's one of the valuable skills. Now, we've got some questions from the audience here, so let's have a look. What have we got here? So, okay, somebody's dropped a reasonably high level ish kind of Kabbalah question here, so I'm just going to put this out, and so whoever would like to comment, here we go. What have we got? If I recall correctly, Barden states the need of the Godhead to work with the 2-letter keys. How this comes to be. Now, I don't know. Can anyone comment on this?
Well, okay, I guess I'll take a swing. Generally speaking, you need to have worked through the first letter key before you do the multi-letter keys. For the most part, that means you're going to be invoking the letters at an Akashic level. So, you can reason through it that way. Because the 2-letter combinations, if performed mechanically, which is how I recommend doing it, you take two distinct energies, like say you're doing the EN letter formula. Okay. You do the letter E, then you do the letter N, then you do the letter E, then you do the letter N. And you keep doing that until they fuse into this other thing. And that becomes that. So that's one way of looking at it. I'm sure, everybody here who has experience with this can have another view on it. But for the most part, you don't want to engaging the multi-letter keys until you've at least worked through the single letter key. That would be my advice.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to comment?
If we look at what Barden writes, and I would agree with this, he clearly explains that once you have done all this work with the single letter key, there is a degree of automaticity, if you'll pardon that kind of, I don't know if that's a real word. There's a degree of automatic activation, kind of. It's not exactly like that. When you use formula, you still have to, you still have to be aware of the physical, astral, mental bodies. You still have to, depending on the level that you're working at, let's say it's an astral level, you still have to have an image. You still have to have the color, the sonics, the fundamental spiritual principle running. But he doesn't, I don't think he talks about having the Godhead state as a necessity. I could probably go and get the book and find the bit where he says this, because and the reason I focus on this is because I actually went through the single letter key, thought I had achieved it, but had not. And I got some extra training from Ray, and things improved. But I basically redid the whole of the single letter key, and I did find this kind of, it's not completely automatic, but there is a degree of activation that just kind of springs up in the multiple letter formulae when you've really done your homework on the single letter key first. And then there, of course, Bob is absolutely correct. You have to get the single letter key done properly. And my experience, only having failed on the first attempt of doing that, only goes to emphasize how correct Bob is when he pointed that out. But in terms of the question, I don't think it's absolutely necessary to do the Godhead, as in the end of initiation into Hermetics, and the necessity for the Godhead for evocation in practice of magical evocation. I don't think for formally, so by all means, people, please do shoot me down if you disagree, but I don't think it's an absolute essential. And particularly if you bear in mind all the other stuff you've got running. For example, with a 4-letter key, you're going to have all the senses, the alignment of the physical, astral, mental. You're going to have the spiritual principles of each letter, the mental. Astral, you're going to have images. The image may even morph as you do the formula with the colors of each letter as you add that to the image. And then there's going to be an elemental mix. You know, if you can fit the Godhead in there as well, oh, nice one. but you need to get it really nice and tight what you're doing, and as I say, the necessity therefore is to have fully realized the single letter key, really properly, you know, gone through that, so that there's absolutely no shadow of a doubt that you have done that work. And then what follows is a momentum or some kind of semi-automatic tendency, or it's very hard to explain, but that then is elicited when you do multiple formulae, and things seem to just sort of naturally lock in quite readily. And for that reason, I say that the Godhead is not essential for 2, 3, and 4 letter keys. That's my view.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to jump in on this? Victoria.
I'll just give a little bit of my own perspective. If the state of the Godhead is not needed for working with 2 letter keys or 3 or 4, it kind of highlighted for me there's different degrees of quality and quantity and manifestation with any type of magic we do. It depend on the source we're pulling it from, our own vessels and vehicles. So I would take this as something to experiment with if you get to or are at that level of doing 2 letter keys, to try to get into your own Godhead and then speak the 2 letter keys. I'm surmising there might be a mechanism, because I think the 2 letter keys are working on different levels of reality and having more kind of fuse input than just a single letter, that if you do it from the state of the Godhead mechanically, that might have a different kind of charge than if you weren't doing that. So kind of rather than at a flatline interpretation, I would say, why don't you see this as maybe a challenge to do for yourself, and to see how operating Kabbalah from the Godhead might change the outcome of your Kabbalah work.
May I offer a thought experiment? Sorry is that okay?
Please.
Okay. You see, when I went through the single letter key the first time and falsely believed that I had completed it, what I was doing with the multiple letter keys was I was doing the Godhead, and I was getting an output. Now the thing is, I realized that because I was doing the Godhead, I could get an output with anything, runes, ogam, because it was the Godhead that was producing the output, not the letters. This is my belief now, and like I say, I'm perfectly happy to be wrong about it, but it's how I see it. And like I say, that what you need is for there to be a semi-automatic kind of activation of these letters, such that obviously if you do the Godhead with them, this is good, but it is not an essential thing, because you have been so thorough with the single letter formulae. And because you've been absolutely thorough and solid with the single letter formulae, there is this almost, well, there's not almost, it is a semi-automatic activation, as long as you frame the sonics, the sounds, the elements, the tone, the color correctly. There's this activation that occurs. And when I went through the single letter key the first time and didn't get it properly done, the only way I was getting that activation was because I was doing the Godhead with it. And when I then went through the single letter key again and really hammered it properly into shape, yes, the Godhead would be good, but there's this tendency towards activation, whether the Godhead is being expressed or not, and that's what I have found. so I could use I don't know, Greek letters or Coptic letters or whatever, or Egyptian hieroglyphs, and I could do the Godhead, and I can start to get a result. But that kind of me is kind of it's more like, to me, the kind of thing I would have done in the past in a ritual magic, rather than the distinctive cabala that Bardin expresses. So what I'm saying is it's not incorrect to employ the Godhead. What I'm saying is that you can get an out, if you are really solid with a single letter key, you can get an output even if for some reason it's not appropriate to use the Godhead on that particular formula. That may sound a little paradoxical, but that is what I respectfully put forward.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. This is a great topic for conversation. Would anyone else like to jump in on this? 3, 2, 1. Nope. Okay. Well, we've got a couple of audience questions here that actually slot in nicely on side with this. And I'm going to start with, okay. So I've just had a message here. Perseus and Falcon Books need, James and Tanya need to head off shortly. So I want to just say thank you so much for joining in. And do you guys have anything you want to share with us? Any final words? Any upcoming things to look forward to that you would?
Nothing too special. It's all in the way. It's all on the way. It's all in the pipeline. Sorry, we're going to head off, guys. It's just that the dog it absolutely is making it abundantly clear that we don't have a choice. Anyone with a dog knows what we're talking about. So yeah, thank you. Very interesting chat today with the questions. So thank you for those people putting those questions in the chat. It's nice to get some juicy ones.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, no, very interesting Kabbalah questions. Yes, sorry, we have to go. But yeah, not really much to add. Just like I say, keep posting. Falcon Books, got amazing things happening. Like I say, we've got the prayer anthology coming out soon. Also working on some fun things like designing new fonts and borders and all the creative stuff going on there as well. So outside of the addition to the publishing stuff. So yeah, so lovely to see everyone today. It's been really nice. So yeah, I'm sorry we have to go. Anyway, take care, everyone, and speak soon.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right. Cool. Okay. Right. Well, so somebody, and this is great because this is broaching on the conversation of terms and conditions and clear conveyance of understanding. And so I'm going to bring up this here. Regarding the terms used in Bardin circles and also in the 3 transformations, i.e. Godhead versus non-dual light versus pure awareness / Rigpa, etc. Is the intended meaning the same for all of these things? So this would be a good one just to pass around. So I'll just open this up. Would anyone like to jump in on this?
I can start. So I would see these as different. So the Godhead, for example, is an individual's highest self, which I consider your highest self. So it's your own individual self sitting in the throne of your higher self. Now, non-dual light is, there's no space and time, but let's just call it a space. It's like a place. So that is more of an environment and a field that your Godhead can exist in. Now, pure awareness, I would see, can exist at the different levels of reality. A little bit more fuzzy at the etheric, but say, mental, astral, akashic, that is awareness more being a state of mind awareness. So that can even be kind of Eastern traditions, kind of inner work about using the development of mind, liberation of the mind presence So that's how I would distinguish these as being different, but there's a lot of overlay, and all different traditions have their own terminology and language kind of pointing us to these different states of reality and existence, although the words we use might be different.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, actually, because I'm unfamiliar with some of these. Thank you very much.
What I would say is this is one of those kinds of questions that I normally like to take a pass on, but not for the reason a lot of people would think. In terms of defining what non-dual light is, pure awareness, God, what have you, I think everybody here has done a pretty good job on that. My issue is actually more with the source material. You know, when people read IIH, they're reading an English language translation of a German work written by a Czech guy whose German translator took some liberty with some of the language in the English translation version. So the reason why I like to avoid questions like this is I'm not even entirely sure what Barden was talking about sometimes when he uses some of these terms. And particularly because some individuals in our community have a Jesus allergy issue with the concept of divinity altogether, or God, for lack of a better term, that tends to flavor things a little bit as well. You know, so what I would say is pay attention to the state of existence you're trying to engage with and try to evaluate it that way, because that's going to be a little more clear cut. Again, some of the language in the books that was used was either too flowery or unintentionally nebulous, or depending upon the translator, potentially nebulous. So sometimes I'm not really sure, you know, when I'm reading the books, what exactly they're trying to say with these quote unquote higher end phenomena, if that's fair.
Yes, thank you for that. And something I've come across in my short tenure in exploring this field over the last decade is that there are many words that people use that are the same words that have different meanings attached to them or different understandings. And so without these sorts of without clear context before engaging in the conversation and basically setting it up with clear understanding of terms and definitions, you can be using the same word and talking about completely different things. And yeah, so I totally get you on that. Okay.
2 minutes. Someone's at the door. 2 minutes.
Yeah, no worries, man. Okay. Oh, wow. That's pretty full on, isn't it? And we'll get back to that. There we go. Okay. So now here's a great one. Any tips on feeling energies more astrally, elements, vital energy, etc., versus having it just stay as a mental experience or an experience in the imagination? Okay. Now, this is an interesting one because this is about making your practice as tangible in the physical, I think, as it can be, rather than just, you know, is it real or is it some kind of delusion? And, you know, I think people on this panel who have, you know, especially getting into clairsentience development, will recognize the value of that practice because it adds a certain gravity and weight to what you are doing, making it more palpable, and there's more opportunity for genuine conviction of experience to arise. So would anyone like to comment on this?
Sure. Yeah, clairsentience training, obviously body training. If you're a mechanical type practitioner, those are definitely the two ways to go. Because again, as Phil points out, and a lot of us here point out all the time, when you're working with things at a mental level, you can delude yourself into thinking this is some aspect of psychology. when you ground stuff into the deep astral or near physical, you're forced to confront the fact that that's not true. Now, whether you can do that or not, like we talk about, deals with, how good is your clairsentience? How much body work have you done? But I will add this one caveat here because it kind of piggybacks with what we just talked about. Deep faith in the Akasha that generate trumps all of that stuff. Now, again, because people have some issues with religion in our community writ large, this can get a little tricky. But if you look at great magicians of the past, they were all men and women of deep, inalienable faith.
Yeah.
And that gets discounted a lot. And I'll go back to a student of mine who generated non-dual light, complete immersion into it in a whole 6 weeks. Deep faith. The same individual almost got himself and his fiance killed in Siberia when he invoked a hailstorm, and the hail ended up being soccer ball sized, out in the woods in Siberia. So if you're approaching this from a standpoint of an intellectual, clairsentience, body training, that has to be your first step. But don't confuse that with the power of faith. And if you want to go dark side with this, you can even quote Vader, do not ignore the faith, the power of the dark side. Well, that was Vader talking about his faith and what was going on. Again, mechanics, if you have to use them, because they're easy to break out, but don't ever ignore the underlying metaforces. That's what I would say.
Right, valuable. Thank you. Would anyone else? Please, Victoria.
Bob made great points, but I would suggest trying to build the ball exercises.
Yeah.
You're going to say that too, Phil?
I was thinking of it. I'm really pleased you say it because you can explain it better than I could.
Well, maybe not, because I was born clairsentient, so I didn't have to build it kind of raw. It was just there. But I know the build the ball exercise really helps. So you can start with your palms, close or as far as ways you want, and you can just imagine charging it with energy and feeling that energy. And you can even do experiments with other people where you maybe put your balls together and separate, or like pass your ball to them and they take it, and then it becomes a combined ball, and then you can build it up. But then that's also, I feel like I talked about this in the last one too, this last week. Maybe I didn't, or maybe it was in a different post, but about how you can also use build the ball to charge energies and learn to discern different energies. So if you wanted to do a ball, say with solar energy or lunar energy or Mercury energy, that's one way besides mental wandering or astral traveling, where you just start getting hands-on. Because as you develop yourself magically, I feel like being able to identify different energy signatures becomes very important, because you have to understand where is the input coming from and what are you getting and what are you sending and what are you working with. So, for example, if you are invoking a spirit and the counterintelligence ends up showing up, but you don't have the bearings to understand, this is a counterintelligence trying to masquerade as the original intelligence, then that becomes an issue. So you could start at the very basic level, developing discernment of different energy signatures just by building the ball. And, you can even do your soul mirror work. So, you put in like love or joy or even negative things like sadness, and you can put them in the ball and just kind of observe them and understand, okay, how is this operating? So then you can even see, how is this energy that's usually within my soul, and then you put it into a ball, and then you can look at it objectively as well. That's more of an intellectual exercise that you are infusing into an astral level exercise, but the tangibility comes with building the ball.
Wonderful. Thank you. Philip, have you got anything to share on this?
Yeah, now that now that the ball's been mentioned, I something else I was desperately thinking about. Within Baden, obviously, you can intensify the elemental work so that you do genuinely feel quite hot or quite cold or heavier or lighter. So that would be, you know, just emphasizing that those exercises can produce an output. Outside of the Baden corpus, one of the things that I've come across that people get some very strong results with, as I mentioned last week, is Pope Runyan's dark mirror method, which is, I mean, if you look historically, you can see similar things being done. For example, in Enochian magic, Dean Kelly sometimes used a sheet of obsidian, which is sometimes shown at the British Museum, and actually got stolen and then returned a few years ago. So, you know, there are other ways to get early results if you want early results. But I'm going to tie this back to the earliest question we had about how do you maintain your practices. And I would suggest that if you do rigorous practices, you'll suddenly get one of these emphatic, non-mental or astral or even physical results just through the pure rigor of what you've done. And like I mentioned, when that occurs, you kind of just, well, there we are. That was really good. And now you just kind of move on. You're not so concerned about it anymore. You're more concerned about the broader approaches to developing the self. I suspect after that, as I mentioned, breakthrough experience. But there are ways to have these breakthrough experiences both within Baden's practices and from without. The ball technique is a really good one. Pope Runyan's dark mirror. But as I say, if you're just looking to be really balanced and strong within Baden stuff, just go solid into the elemental stuff until you're boiling on a cold day, and you know, stuff like that. That would be my suggestion.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, some great feedback there. And you know, just for myself, you know, in the early stages of energy healing training, especially in Reiki, you know, there's practices that we focus on having another living body next to us, and we basically tune into this feeling, and then we move our hands over and we develop sensitivity and awareness there. And this can be also, you know, translated into going out into the forest, finding a really big tree, which is essentially a large vital force emanating radiation device. And you go out there and you say, hello, tree. And then you transfer your consciousness, or you just start building the ball, or you find a way to play with this idea of a torus field or some kind of, you know, you're tuning in. Basically, this thing, you know, the problem with people is that we're all roughly the same. We're not, unless you're dealing with a small person, a really tall person, you know, a giant tree is going to, you know, effectively, in my understanding, qualitatively is going to put out a larger amount of the stuff for you to interact with. And so you can develop conviction by working with people at a subtle level. Then you can also go out into the forest and you can connect with a tree and have quite a unique experience. And then you go to another tree, maybe a different species, and it has a slightly different signature. So I found that going one further, like it's one thing, so you can start with the sensitivity here. You can change the intention of what the flavor of that energy is, whether it's vital, astral, I mean, mental, obviously, a little bit outside of this, but, you know, and then flavoring it elementally, and then also environmental sort of training partners as well, being large emanating devices that are just like right there. Hello, friend, connect with that. Wonderful. And this is, like I said, going one further where it's like, yes, I can feel it, but then it's like going, now I'm going to explore this. And I found that really reinforces my faith via conviction through developing awareness, having regular tangible experiences. Mark Rasmus talks about this with his book of trees, and I found this to be a very valuable exercise. And so, yeah, great question. Thank you. And great responses. Okay, here we go. I've got another question here from the audience. Suggestions on a good pranayama practice, and how does that improve our meditations? Now, we could also probably translate pranayama into sort of modern Western colloquialism or something in the nature of like basically breath work or thereabouts, but I will pass this on to the panel to correct me and to add some valuable context, perhaps, from their experience. So, Victoria, please.
I'm just going to give a plug to Bob on a pranayama course he doesn't have out yet. But I met with him and some students in West Virginia to do a pranayama exercise. And Bob can maybe talk about what tradition it comes from. And it was very, very potent. It was pretty effective in turning on my eyes and my clairvoyance. And also it clears out your energy bodies of different gunk and debris. So that's my bit. Otherwise, I don't have any other kind of practices. I've done the ones where, you breathe in one nostril, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. A lot of times when I take a bath, I'll hold my breath and put my head underwater for 30 seconds or a minute at a time. So pranayama practice isn't that integral to my practice, but I was actually thinking about breathing just before this came up, because in our first Q&A, Phil had someone on here who, one of the things he talked about was breathing, and how we don't tend to realize that we hold our breath. I like to hold my breath sometimes because then I can shift into the astral more easily and kind of recalibrate my energies. But like breathing is very essential for your energy regulation. Breath is life. Without breath, we would not be here operating in our organic bodies. That's it for me.
Bob, would you like to share something?
Yeah. Pranayama, breath retention practices writ large, are definitely a weak point in terms of IIH and yogic practice in the West in general. They're incredibly profound. They can get out of hand and be quite dangerous too to the individuals if you really do a good job of screwing it up. But at a minimum, I would say something like alternate nostril breathing is a good place to start, because it generally generates a kind of astral level equilibrium. Pranayama, breath and the astral are really closely related. They're so closely related. You can in fact say that the astral is generated by breath. Fair enough. There are stronger and weaker ways of generating that. A lot of the better systems I've seen out there have some component of breath retention work associated with them. Where this is particularly valuable for people involved with these practices is positive breath holds, where you're holding your breath for an extended period of time with full lungs. Tends to take care of this reactive empathy problem a lot of us have, where we become so sensitive to our environment that we start picking up things from the environment. And it becomes very difficult to determine, is that me or is that this other thing? A lot of people mitigate that behavior by smoking, which is not terribly helpful long term. Extended positive breath holds solve that problem very quickly. They also tend to make people a little more animated. I've learned how to do this from two different schools. One is Trollcore, which is from Tibetan Buddhism, and the other is from the Mount Ermai Sudden Enlightenment School out of Western China. Both of these systems are either Tibetan in origin or Tibetan influenced, and they're quite profound. I've been talking for a few months now how I'm going to start to integrate that material into the 60 skills curriculum work that I do, because it's so valuable. This kind of work also really turns on your clairvoyance. I've seen people develop clairvoyance strictly from doing positive breath holds over time. I've also seen people cause themselves cardiac arrhythmia by doing positive breath holds over time. So knowing what you're doing and having some training is certainly important, but without babbling on all night long, pranayama is an incredibly powerful practice. It's positively corresponds with improvements in longevity and is something that a lot of traditional systems leverage. So, fair enough.
Wonderful, thank you. Philip, have you got anything you'd like to talk about on this?
Well, if you look at Bardhan, pranayama probably lends itself well to the initial pore breathing work. And I would imagine it would help with the practice where you do the actual astral projection, where you come out of your body with your breathing and you look at your body and the chest is barely moving. And as Bardhan describes, there's this ribbon going from you to the your physical body that you're looking down on. I did that a few times, found the after effects distinctly unpleasant, like I had hypothermia almost or something. So I just did it a few times just to give it a whirl. I never really, but I wonder if I had also put pranayama with that, if perhaps I would have had a better time of it. I have done pranayama in the past, and you get this sweat, this strange kind of sweat. And the reason I was doing it is back in the late 80s, early 90s, is to do with the Golden Dawn technique called the vibratory formula of the middle pillar. Because I read Regardie's book on this, and he was describing how there are similarities between that technique and pranayama, and they complement each other. And that is certainly true. The vibratory formula is towards, I would say, the upper end of what I presume is the outer order of the Golden Dawn. And you do, when you do the Hebrew divine names for the first time, as Regardie points out, do not have any sharp corners of furniture nearby or anything like that, because you can sometimes fall over with this when this kind of backflow occurs as part of the technique. I suppose, as the Golden Dawn says, invoke Adonai Haaretz until thy radiance sufficeth, and that is certainly so. That pranayama for me wasn't an objective in itself, but something that I would do some of to facilitate other work. And with hindsight, I could have done some of it to help with work as well. Where I didn't do it, it might have helped with that work. So I'm not an expert on pranayama. I've used it a little bit. It went well, luckily. But I suspect actually people with experience, I would say, as kind of Bob's kind of implied this, really, you might be something that you might want to do with someone who's already got experience with it. And to a certain extent, that was perhaps the reason why I just sort of touched it a little bit and didn't go too far in with the methodology, just enough to kickstart me with something else. I think with pranayama and breath retention, heart arrhythmia, bad, clairvoyance, good. So obviously, it's not really touched on in Bardhan stuff. I would urge people to get hold of people who can give them some training in it, and then I would imagine its applications within Bardhan, the Bardhan corpus, would spring to mind quite readily.
Wonderful, thank you. And oh no, Bob's got a thing. Go on, Bob.
Hey, by the way, there's a very you can apply the vibratory pillar technology towards letter work. And if you do that while holding a pair of kettlebells, using the appropriate line of force, you can have some interesting times. Just make sure you don't drop it on your feet or on a surface that's going to get damaged.
Good to know. Thank you. Yeah. This is fun, but just watch out for this thing. And I just want to say too that for my response to this, as far as from my own practice and my own experiences, that if I'm going to pull the cushion out and I'm going to do a sit for say however long, some of the pre-flight checks or the initial warm-ups before I move into the state, let's say I'm going to do stillness, focus on a stillness practice. Something that someone shared to me a while back is if you want to clear out the pipes before you turn the key, so to speak, You can there's a diver's breath where you breathe in through one nostril and then you breathe out through the other nostril, and then you breathe in through that one, then you breathe out through the other one. Okay, that's one way. And then from the Reiki canon, there is a which is shared in the Aikido world, I understand too. But there's a practice called Joshin Kokyuho, which is essentially you put your awareness into your belly space, into your dantian, and you breathe in, and you sit in there, and I mean, I'd even take it back to the point where you put your hands on your tummy, and you practice breathing in and out, and you're extending, you know, you're going past the general shallowness of chest breathing, and you're using more of your breathing apparatus and space, which opens you up even further, which will hold you in good state and good stead. So, you know, there's but then of course there are certainly much more rigorous and you know, like Bob was saying, you know, I've got some friends who engage in some pretty heavy breathing stuff, and yeah, I have to say that as far as a tool goes, breathing shouldn't be something to be skipped over, because there's a lot of value to be harvested from exploring the world of breathing, even if you're just lying on the bed and wanting to switch the body off to start doing some mental wandering practice or otherwise. So yes, great question, and thank you for sharing that. Okay, now we've gone through the audience questions. Now we've hit the 90-minute mark here, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's checked in and has hung out. And if anyone, I've got a couple more questions here that we can probably fire through quickly, but if anyone in the panel needs to disappear, now would be a good time to say thanks and see you later. So I'll just put that one out there. Yeah, sweet. Cool. All right. That's pretty crazy. All right, let's do it. Okay. So here we go. Next question. Okay. Right. Let's do a question on technology. Because obviously when for example, when Initiation into Hermetics was written, things were a little different back then. And we now have access to some things that can add convenience, add more subtlety and nuance to how we interact with data and metrics that we work with to improve our practice and refine our process and our methodology. So I'm going to put this one up on the stage here. Where are we? Up on the stage. I love that. Okay, so the developments in technology have given us new ways to conveniently explore and refine training methods. What modern technologies have you personally found to be of great benefit? Victoria, would you like to jump in on this?
Yeah, I'll give some very basic forms of technology. One is an app I use where you can record your own affirmations in your voice, and you can do up to 3 in this app for free. It's called Think Up, like think in the direction up. And then it'll play it in a loop with some music in the background. So you could just have your headphones on during the day. And, you know, if you're listening to it all day, whether you just do 1 affirmation or if you do 3 different ones or 2, I like that because, you know, besides saying it yourself or thinking it, you can have it automatically feeding into your subconscious while you're working on something else. I also like the availability with music, like hertz frequencies and binaural beats. So, like at a very basic level, auditory input is impressions for our astral body. So, you know, but it kind of influences it. So based on the vibration of the music you're listening to, that can tune your innermost self into different states of frequency. I mean, for example, if you're religious or not, but if you listen to religious music, you know, if you're Christian and at church and listening to beautiful hymns, or if you're Buddhist and you're in a monastery and listening to people chanting, you know, that also has a powerful effect. Other technology, I know there's a living crystal from that 60 Skills and another magician did. Maybe he'll cover that. And also just the phone and the computers at the basic level. You know, if we were pre-internet and we found friends barred in a library or a magical bookstore, we'd be doing it by ourselves at home, you know, maybe sharing it with a friend, but because we have the internet, and phones where we can call people. We can have this YouTube live stream right now. I feel like that is an advancement in magical as well. Magical, whether it's development for yourself, magical community, being exposed to new things to learn, different ideas and perspectives and ways of things, seeing things too.
Let me just, before Bob, this is relevant. Hang on. I'll be right back in 30 seconds.
Love it. Yeah, binaural beats are great. You know, brain driving technology generally found to be a pretty safe bet.
This is something I got from Bob. Sorry to interrupt. It's a new piece of technology. I was initially skeptical, but I got some of them anyway. The living crystal device.
Yes,
it's rather nice. It's quite good. What I do with it, I'll just turn it on briefly. It's got a little pencil in there. What I do with it is I use traditional stuff. So say for example, I want to bring a genii or an angel, drawing an angel to a shoe stone. So I'll have my quartz sphere, and I'll very carefully, because I don't know if it can take the weight if I just mash it down, I'll put that on top of the living crystal device. So I'm using traditional magical technology, and I'm applying this modern innovation, and I'm finding that there's an improvement in ease of contact. In other words, if I do the drawing of an angel to a shoe stone, generally, yes, good. If I put the shoe stone on top of the living crystal device, better. And that's a clear technological advancement, which I can only, I mean, you know, I can't say it's the best thing in sliced bread, even though I think it is, because obviously people have to draw their own opinions on these things. But that's what I've found it useful, and I'm very pleased that I encountered it, and I'm very pleased about that. Yeah. So there you go. Yes. It was really difficult to get because of import laws and all sorts of nonsense. It was really difficult to get it into the UK, and so I once again thank you, Bob, for the 20% discount because it came to the UK, and I hope that you can find a way to be able to ship it here, because obviously you can't do that for everyone. You've got to earn a crust. So
the difficulty we're running into these days is, for those of you involved with logistics, is the international shipping rates have gone bonkers, and they're completely unpredictable now. So if we mail it on one day, it may be somewhat reasonable. If we mail it on the wrong day, not so much. And so we're looking at some options for fixing that. But
I hope you do, mate, because it's a good piece of gear.
I'm glad people like it. It's interesting. It's about 80-20. 80% of the people out there who are into this kind of stuff really love it. And the other 20% are like, why did you bother sending this to me? So I don't know what to say. I have found it to be an extension and increase on traditional items like a magic mirror or a shoe stone. And the reason for that is because it produces, and when you work with a shoe stone or a sphere, you load the sphere prior to bringing through the genii you wish to interact with. The living crystal device seems to generate a degree of energy automatically, so it gets you started. Yeah,
that's what makes it interesting and different to traditional equipment.
It's curious. We're still not exactly sure why. I've written about this in the Uranian spirit that kind of kick-started this whole process, on the blog, and I've talked about it on other videos. But it seems to generate more of something that people use. Why? I really don't know. It seems to be fairly programmable in that whatever energy you program it with, it will start making more of it. And again, since it's not technically a living, breathing organism, I'm not sure how that works, but somehow it does. And there's that. There's the stuff that obviously Victoria's talked about in terms of binaural beats and just timing devices and all of that other kind of thing. I know some people have gotten really good results from using light and sound machines, teaching themselves how to generate very specific brainwave patterns upon command. I bet a few people tell me that's very useful. But in terms of tech, I'd say that's the main stuff. Being careful that electromagnetic radiation writ large seems to be counterproductive on some level. So, the 4G, 5G stuff being underneath a electrical line where you practice doesn't tend to be very helpful either. But those are really the only observations that I have. And I have to run for a second. I may be able to come back in a minute, but excuse me, guys.
Yep. Wonderful. Yes, there's many toys and many ways to play. And I just want to comment quickly on binaural beats because I used them for many years and had some wonderful successes with them. The problem is, though, is that they can become a crutch, and ideally, my understanding is, and my own personal preferences, is that I want to be able to self-generate these experiences. Without the need for the, I don't want to have to carry around a bag full of fingers pointing at the moon that I have to ride every time I want to go to that place. I want to be able to self-generate. And so I found that, once I shifted on from binaural beats, it gave me the flavors, and I had to learn how to recall those flavors myself. And that was when the value was there. And the other one is that putting little magnets in your ears has a disruptive effect as well. And so, there's plenty of research to show, like the safe distance to hold the phone away from the ear and these types of things. But you can get headphones that are essentially the sound generation, or the sound drivers are down here, and it's a hollow tube that comes up your head. So you don't have these little active magnets essentially creating extra noise in the signal, so to speak. And I really enjoy hearing about this living crystal device because, it sounds like you can generate this thing that you can sort of take advantage of, and then you'll turn it off, and then you will go, okay, well, the thing can take me up about here, or can increase this or do this, then it's like, okay, well, how can I use that to help me get up there myself? And so you have a steady metric, because I'm presuming it doesn't have like a power dial.
What I sometimes do is, if I'm going to generate some electromagnetic fluid, I'll turn on the device and put the sphere of electromagnetic fluid into its area of effect. And then when I finished generating the fluid, I mean, sometimes I do it without, because I forget to use it. But when I do it, there's an improvement. And then I'll turn off the field to reify the fluid. I probably wouldn't need to turn off the field, but it just feels kind of, I'm a bit of a fetishist when it comes to ceremonial. I have been all my life. I do ritual magic, so there's always got to be a process. So yes. I turn it off, then I reify the fluid. But I would say that I get fewer difficult days with, you have off days with everything. Using this device reduces the intensity of off days is what I would say.
Victoria, please.
I've even used it for ambient energy while I'm working. I'll have it sitting on my computer and just kind of ambient energy that just kind of there. Especially if it's an intense work day, it would just kind of help me stay kind of focused and tuned in more. So I like what you mentioned, Phil, about not having it be a crutch, but it can also be like a boost and an aid, So,
yeah, and there's many things to take advantage of, and obviously you can go searching, and there's lots of purported and claimed benefits or things that we can interact with. Now, a while ago, I haven't publicly shared it, but somebody has come up with a type of a wheel that is an indicator of your psychic abilities or something like that. Well, I mean, if this has got some legitimacy to it, then I would sit down with it and go through familiar practices and see how this thing is effective. So, you know, if there is tech out there that can be used as like a feedback monitor for success. And we have things like, you know, galvanic skin response. We have EEGs and EKGs and things where we can essentially start to, you know, create more autonomic functions, or sorry, take over autonomic functions in the body, the breath being generally the first one. But then we can also start managing our own internal systems. Caveats of always, you know, taking care when we start playing with things. And obviously Mr. Barden goes into great length somewhat to talk, say, you know, be mindful of how you interact with the brain and the heart, for example. So, you know, these are all important considerations, but there are certainly many ways to explore how how our practices can affect the physical. Please.
Well, one of the things that is an obvious use of technology, but perhaps is considered by some to be controversial, is you were talking about galvanic skin response. Well, of course, that's the Dianetics thing. The what are they called? The all those famous film stars are part of the organization.
Paleontologists. Yeah.
That's the ones. So they use galvanic skin response as part of their methodology, initially at least as a purpose of psychological unfoldment and, you know, addressing issues. Before, obviously, I'm not a Scientologist, so I don't know what else they do with it. But you can clearly see they're using technology there, basic lie detector technology, the galvanic skin response, to help to identify things that perhaps the person may not be fully aware of as they progress within that organization. I know the image of that organization is mixed. I'm afraid I'm entirely ignorant of what goes on in it further along, but I do note that technological innovation that they employ.
Yeah, and so this is the thing is that there's groups out there that are going, hey, look, this is worth paying attention to, even if it's just, you know, with some understanding as to the why, you know, like, but you know, when it's a case of like, you know, the driving it from the mental body to create physical effects in the world, you know, when instrumentation is able to detect greater and greater levels of subtlety and nuance, and that can be taken advantage of to help us develop ourselves so that we develop a firmer conviction in what we're doing, because we can see that there's an effect from our cause. And, you know, these are valuable things. And so when you've got an amplifier, like say the living crystal device, that's able to basically like, it's not training wheels. That's not really the right way of doing it. But what it does is it gives you maybe a bit more juice. Now I haven't got one, so I can't claim from personal experience, but that's what I'm picking up from the panel here, is that it's like, okay, you know, it's like, here's a boost, like you said. And
it's like an activation. If you say that a mirror or a shoe stone, traditional devices, are good, they can have accumulator put in them, and that in itself tells you what they do. You load them with energy. Whereas this living crystal device, you turn it on, you get a trickle of energy before you load. And that's interesting. I'm not necessarily earth-shattering, but it's certainly interesting and certainly worth noticing and investigating, I would say. And as I say, I've been using it in interaction with the more traditional devices, and it's been very interesting indeed. And I'm sure that, you know, that, like you say, binaural beats, the galvanic skin response, the Scientologists do. There are. I think there's a whole sort of like seam of unexplored material that over time is going to gradually. I was talking to James on Messenger about virtual reality and you know, and the AR, I forget what that abbreviation. Augmented reality. Well, isn't that putting consciousness into Yesod in a way? If you look at it from the Kircher tree, you know, the physical body is an akasha. You're fighting a dragon with your VR helmet on, so you're in the Yesodic astral treasure house of images world in your consciousness. So isn't, you know, so that you could even in very simplistic terms, look at it and see how it's moving us almost involuntarily back up the tree, not necessarily for good sometimes. But anyway, I digress.
Wonderful. That's really interesting. Victoria, please.
To Philip mentioning augmented reality, I've had like a parallel life fantasy for years, and I don't know where it originated from, about virtual reality becoming so developed that, and developing some kind of app or program that is actually useful for people's inner work, spiritual development, psychological development, whether it is realities for path working with gods or with the Kabbalah tree of life, or different psychological work, or it can even be great for helping people with like black mirror work. So say someone has anger issues and you put them in these stimulated realities where they can work through these kind of issues in a safe space to then transform it as well. I mean, we then again are using technology as a crutch rather than self-generating those things, but I still feel like it can be potent, at least for the mass public, to have this kind of method if technology gets to that point in our time, and if someone actually develops these kind of apps that target this kind of output.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are really fun topics to spin. Bob, go for
it. I would say that tech of any kind, not necessarily modern, seems to fall into one of two categories. It either helps you tune into something, a sigil, a certain kind of stone, things of this nature, binaural beats, okay? And then you've got stuff that generates more energy to work with. Obviously Living Crystal, and thank you for the praise for that, everybody, does that to some degree. Things like puja or fire ceremony generates a lot of ambient astral energy that can be harnessed. Things like incense, because you're converting a physical substance into a gas, you're burning it. That liberates a lot of subtle energy that can be harnessed as well when you know how. In terms of things that are externally generating energy, there's things that we can do that internally generate energy. Pranayama, holding posture, walking techniques, the list goes on. So if you're going to look at tech aiding stuff, I've broadly seen it fall into those two categories of either it helps you tune into something or it generates more of something. And if you look at things that way, you might find some answers you can appreciate. So for what it's worth.
Yeah, wonderful. A great way to sort of, to put them into perspective there too, because, there's lots and lots and lots of gadgets and gimmicks and things that are available. And I think that one thing I've really enjoyed about this particular community is that people like to know the why and the how. And so there's a lot of very intelligent people who are open to exploring these things. And when they say, wow, this generates some kind of experience, and I think I can explain it somewhat. And that's very helpful, because we also know that there's a lot of people out there just wanting to make a buck too. And, if you're a good salesman, you can spin anything to look kind of good. Okay, now I've got another quick question in the chat here, and it's a little outside of the Barden corpus, but that's all good because we're flexible here, of course. And what do you guys think about the daily usage of the LBRP, LIRH, obviously the lesser banning ritual of the pentagram and the lesser invoking ritual of the hexagram? So who would like to jump in on that?
Well, I do it fairly regularly. So as I mentioned previous, you have with the banishing, it's important to use the invoking pentagram, which is from the point down to the left hip, which is the earth location on that pentagram. That's invoking, and then away from, up again. Equally, otherwise you'll banish stuff from your life that you might like to keep in your life. I think that there's a heritage to them, as people are probably aware. I think Eliphas Levi talks about the lesser banishing and how the archangels form a square around you. And I think that there is a need for a ritual magician to set up a work area. And in Western magic, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram is kind of the go-to. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't others that are good. With the hexagrams, I personally, I find that I like the star sapphire, the thelemic star sapphire, somewhat more. And the hexagrams themselves, I will use in ceremony, obviously, to invoke a planetary force, before I then kick in with the Barden work. So I might do an invoking hexagram on an object before I then start using Barden's technique to load the object. So there's an interaction between the two for me. The rituals themselves, you need at a what I would call a basic level, you obviously need to visualize correctly, employ telesmata and sonics correctly. But where it really takes off, in my opinion, is when you actually bring in Barden's, the attainments from Barden's training, the consciousness of the senses in the spirit, suddenly push any ritual, and certainly therefore the lesser banishing of the pentagrams, the hexagram rituals, suddenly those become much more effective in bringing through the kinds of forces that you seek to work with. And similarly, just as you move on in Barden's techniques to the Godhead, which was mentioned earlier in an earlier question, doing the Godhead with these rituals, I would say, is the best thing since sliced bread, really. There you go. But I've been a ritual magician since I was allowed to be. You know, I tried to be a ritual magician, and my landlady threw me out. And then I went and lived somewhere where I didn't tell anyone I was doing ritual magic, and I did it in my little bedsit room. So you know, doing more to do with ritual magic in any way conceivable is always going to attract me. So what can I say? I'm a bit biased in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Philip's absolutely the representation of the ceremonial approach. So the only thing I'll add is remember to counterbalance.
Yeah.
Remember to counterbalance. And you counterbalance invoking planetary rituals through Luna. You know, so just remember to counterbalance. Otherwise, you will get one-sided results. You know, I've known too many people over the years who've done extensive work with protection rituals to the point where they can't hold a job and nobody pays attention to them. I'm like, well, you did 100, you know, protection, invisibility rituals in a row. That's kind of what you're going to get. So, you know, that's, just remember to counterbalance, because I certainly have nothing to add to what Philip has to say. Just kind of want to accentuate that point.
Thank you. Victoria, have you got anything you'd like to share?
I used to do the lesser banishing ritual with the pentagram daily, but not the other one. In terms of identifying any effects, I couldn't say, because I was mixing in some other magical practices as well. But I think if you are of the Golden Dawn influence, you can probably find how often people do LBRP. I mean, I was kind of advised to do it daily, So I was doing it daily. But as Bob mentioned, counterbalance, or as you have here, there's 2 rituals. So maybe not just one. And that's my bit.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. And you know, like I've been down this track as well, and very valuable to learn these forms and to explore the, you know, what they bring. And I know that, for example, commentators, teachers like, say, Damien Eccles, you know, stress the value of, you know, keeping up a regular momentum with it. And I have to say, look, you know, the ritual side of things is actually quite enjoyable in a lot of ways, because it's sort of like it's almost like acting practice, or, you know, like you're assuming a role. And yeah, it's funny. It's kind of cool that I got brought up again. I might dust a couple of the books off. Now I've got now we obviously had a passing in the community of someone who was quite influential, and that was Mr. Robert Bruce. So Robert, rest in peace, brother. Now we have a question here, and I'll put it up, and we'll probably make this the last question, if that's cool with everyone. And yep, that's cool. Okay, so here we go. And I'll throw this one to Bob first, if that's cool. Is there any difference between Robert Bruce's OBE technique and Franz Barden's mental wandering technique? I have found great success in Robert Bruce's rope method personally. So,
yeah, I've used Robert's stuff from time to time in terms of mental wandering. You know, there are a lot of different ways to do it. What I would say when it comes to mental wandering, because it's such a foundation level skill for a lot of other practices, whatever way you have of doing that works well for you, do that one. Don't be doctrinaire about it. It's the effect you're looking for, not necessarily the technique that's ultimately important. So, for what it's worth. And by the way, I never met Robert. You know, it's one of those regrets, but I read his book several times when I was much younger, and got a lot of benefit out of it. I was just as surprised as everybody else by his passing. I didn't think he was actually that old, to be completely honest with you, but some folks here may have known him better.
Thank you. Victoria.
I'm very sorry. I've never met Robert, and I haven't read any of his books, so I'm afraid I can't really offer anything on this.
Okay, thank you.
I have one of Robert Bruce's books on my nightstand. Sometimes there's several books at once, but right now I just have one of his books. So I would say they're different, because mental wandering and out-of-body projection from Robert Bruce, from what I understand, is astral projection. And Franz Barden's mental wandering is mental wandering. And then Franz Barden also has his astral projection. However, even with mental wandering, you can use a rope method, where you imagine going from like your pineal gland or something and climbing up a rope. So for Franz Barden's mental wandering, I was actually at that exercise in my training. And I tried it a few times and I wasn't getting success, but sometimes that happens with exercises. You know, you just keep doing it over and over again. But then I came across 60 Skills had a technique for mental wandering, and that just clicked for me like that. And I went through the steps in the process outlined by 60 Skills Mental Wandering for a while, just because, okay, this is the routine. But then I found I could just instantly mental wander without having going through all the steps for the exercise. You know, once you, like, the steps are kind of like the training wheels on a bike, but eventually with any kind of magical ability, you know, you might not have to go through the entire process. So for example, like clairvoyance, where it's loading the eyes with light, there can be a point where you don't even have to go through the process of accumulating light in your eyes. You're just able to turn it on. So I would say that there is a difference between the two.
Yeah, and thank you. And I just want to say too, there's obviously, once this comes back to another part of the conversation we've already had, where we've got the same words with different understandings. And so mental wandering, OBE, astral projection, astral travel, and you know, there's a, you know, Barden obviously puts a clear line between, say, mental wandering and, say, you know, actually like ejecting the or taking the astral body and moving it out, and they're quite different. And I think, generally speaking, I've heard Bob mention this in some of his videos too, that the general overall popular understanding is astral projection is the astral body. Chances are it's more likely a mental wandering experience. Yeah, so but yeah, I personally have read through a good chunk of Astral Dynamics, and it's a pretty big read. But I do recall that he did clairsentience exercises in the early part of that as well, which was quite interesting, like having a donut at your knee and pulling it apart and these types of things. And I found that the Qigong, like the astral energy awareness, has been very helpful in things like lucid dreaming. Because when you're in a lucid dream or in a dream environment, you're essentially in the astral and you can feel it. You can use the feeling of the ambient environment to trigger a lucid dream, because it's like, why does it feel kind of soupy and swimming pooly? And that's what I found anyway. And also trying to fly in a lucid dream hasn't been successful. But when I'm getting my Dragon Ball Z hands out from doing shunting exercises and that, I just point them down. All of a sudden, I'm off to the races, man. So yeah, I think this has been such a wonderful chat, everyone. Thank you so much, and so many great questions. And I appreciate everyone sticking around for the overtime. Thank you so much. So I'm going to run through the guest exit strategy here, and I'm going to start with Mr. Philip Harris Smith, who's probably it's probably 3 o'clock in the morning or something there. But I want to say thank you for any final words.
The dog needs to go to the garden. I particularly enjoyed some of the questions because they were on ceremonial magic, and that's my thing. But I've got to say, I do appreciate learning the things I do here as well. And you know, I think I'm quite lucky that I have this kind of interaction, not just to talk about the stuff that I'm interested in, but the questions are very good, and the responses are really. I am getting some considerable value from this. So let me just thank you all for your efforts of listening to me today. It's been a blast.
I appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
I better go now. Zul needs me to go outside. I'll see you again soon, guys. Cheers.
Stay well, man. Okay. All right. Bob, any final words, sir?
Not really. You know, as per usual, 60skills.com. You can find out everything that's going on in my world there. But what I have noticed kind of goes on with what Phil says is that Bardenists in general are much more willing to have this conversation about things, you know, whereas a lot of ritual guys or people from other systems are not. So that's something very special with this group of people, and something I appreciate. Because you don't get to have too many opportunities to go, I don't know, in a public forum with this kind of stuff. And that I think keeps a lot of people honest when you're able to do it. And I've noticed a lot of people can't bring themselves to. So otherwise, guys, it's been great. Thank you. I'll love to do it again sometime soon.
All right. Thank you, Bob. And yeah, great point there at the end there. Great final words. I appreciate this very sort of candid, open sort of conversation, because man, there's stuff I don't know, and I don't pretend to know stuff that I don't. And I'm grateful for such a wealth of knowledge and experiential knowledge at that, which is a big difference from intellectual knowledge. Victoria, have you got anything you'd like to finish with?
I would like to add kind of to what Bob and Philip said is I'm really glad that you set this up, because for a few years I have been wanting sub-public forum of magicians talking and working together in the Barden system. And dare I say, perhaps Barden himself has been watching over these live streams, because I'm sure he keeps tabs on all the magicians in his system and people sharing his works in the world. That's just my opinion. I could be right or wrong. But I'm really glad for this, because Barden is also a niche subject, and it tends to be a solitary practice. I just love that there is a public community available for people to learn from each other, and also just to kind of look and see, like, what are these different magicians about? And seeing we're all our own people. We all have our own things and perspectives, and it can kind of help whoever's watching and listening to kind of inform, okay, what do I want to do in my practice? New things to learn, be introduced to new ideas. So this is great. I'm glad you are hosting this and managing this wonderfully well, and also the great people that you're bringing on.
Thank you for those very kind words, and I'm grateful. You know, like we've got people watching, and we're getting great feedback on the channel and the comments and that. And you guys are really awesome because you're very honest, super interactive, and you know, this is something that we grow together. And so I'm just happy to sort of be able to provide something here. And yeah, but with that said, thank you to everyone. Thank you everyone in the audience. You guys have been great. Thank you for the awesome questions. And please remember to check out all of our wonderful guests' offerings, wares, treasures, and many things and bits and pieces. And it'll all be in the description. Thank you so much. Stay well. Have a beautiful, beautiful week. And yeah, now go practice. All right. See you, everyone. Bye.